Hello all, welcome to this webinar. Our topic today is data strategy and especially business role in it. My name is Ritva Aula and I'm today your host and very excited to hear the opinions and experiences of our great guests. But before we go to the guests, let's have some basic things in the beginning. So please, if you have any questions during the webinar, please add those into the chat and we will pick a couple of them at the end of this session. Please also, if you have ideas about future Data Insiders topics, please also add those into the chat. And at the end of this webinar, we are going to talk about those. But before I let our guests to introduce themselves, I will talk some things about the data and the history through my own history. So I'm Ritva Aula, I'm working as a data advisor at Tietoevry, and I'm helping customers with data strategies, data governance, and metadata management, for example. But the reason why I wanted to start from the ancient history, meaning late 80s, when I was working with real estate topics, and we had only one integration that we needed to take care of. There were a lot of some data was keyed manually in systems, but basically we took care of one integrations and all the information was in the heads of people, on the paper, or in isolated systems. Then 90s went by. We had, first time we really needed to think about data was the VAT legislation change. In the real estate, it meant that we needed to understand the percentage of the VAT usage, how many of the square meters were used for those purposes. And for that, we had only few persons. We were not able to do things manually. So we needed to invent something with data. Also, there were all the time, the amount of data and systems were increasing. And in the beginning of 2000s, I moved to the bank side and leading legal reporting. And first thing that happened was that ECB, meaning European Central Bank, asked us to provide new reporting about the loans and their rates. And we needed to go to the branch offices to really ask the questions, how are they doing the work, how are they keying the data in, and so on. So that was very tangible and concrete, and we really needed to work with those topics. But all the time, the number of applications and those were increasing, and I moved to manufacturing where the problems were different, but all the time the master data became more important, the data warehousing and other things. I also first time noticed that it is actually very difficult to talk with business about data. So many people had already started to talk about applications instead of data. Then in 2014 and 19, I went back to banking where I got the task to design and start implementing data governance. And I thought, wow, this time there is a regulation that forces us to do that. But even that is not so easy because we have used to not to think data through meaning, but we used to think it as part of the applications. 2019, I moved to consultancy, and it was time to reflect that what has happened with other companies, how good they are with data, because we know that data glues everything in. And I noticed, and let's see if our guests have same opinions, that the very much business was thinking about information, and data was something that IT talked about. And then Agile came, and even though Agile is very good, it sometimes left the data topics behind. And for example, documentation of things was not so popular anymore, and it meant that we don't suddenly know what data we have. Then came big data, Hadoops, data lakes, many new technologies, machine learning, AI, that unfortunately many decision makers think that will automatically mean that we can take more benefit of the data. And now when we are in the era of digitalization and we have more and more opportunities, we really need to see if this is the case, or do we actually need to do something with those data topics. And I don't want to forget that there are more and more legislation and also regulations that make us work better with the data. But now enough about me, and I think we need to now go to our guests and let my guests introduce themselves. So Maija, please.
Thank you. So Maija Nikula, working as a Chief Data Officer in KONE. And in this work, me and my team, we are responsible for the data management operating model, also the proactive data quality, and also data asset management, meaning more how do we share data, how do we access data. And how did I ended up in this position and in this data area was that my background is on the enterprise architecture. I came from more on the IT and IT solution architecture side, but always working there with the very closely business lines and business interfaces. And that was the moment when I started to think about that we have to fix the data, which is the content. It is not about the technology itself. And suddenly, when you talk about long enough about this topic, there's a risk that you get that job for yourself. So nowadays, then really working between different business lines, between different processes, but more from the data point of view.
Sameli.
Hey, my name is Sameli Mäenpää. I'm the Chief Data Officer for OP Financial Group. And in OP Financial Group, I'm responsible for data management, but also sort of many other group-wide capabilities like AI, advanced analytics, that kind of things, process automation, SAP kind of finance development, HR development, regulatory reporting, and other things like intranets and so on. So it is a wide group-wide responsibility where the data is actually in the center of it. I mean, if you think about, for example, developing finance, or you think about AML or anti-financial crime in general, all of those are about data. I mean, you look at the same data asset when you lead with data, with financials, and when you fight financial crime. So they are tied together. I became interested about data, I think like maybe 10 years ago, when I started to understand that many companies, their value is formulated through data. I mean, they pretty much own nothing else but the data. And that is how they are valued, and valued high, like Facebook, 1 billion. So, I mean, 1,000 billion, trillion in English. So these kind of things, they really made a difference to me, and I started to think about, I want to work there.
Okay. Maria.
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm Maija Rautavirta from the Ministry of Transport and Communications, and I act as the Director for Data Business Unit. So Data Business Unit is enabling businesses to use data in a more effective way. So it's promoting the policies around data within EU in global perspective, not only around GDPR, but in a more horizontal way in all kind of aspects. But it's also about taking care that the business within transport sector is done based on data. So the data assets of the transport sector are utilized, the public registries are open, and we are doing our business in our backyard as well. So how I ended up in data business was I applied for the job in 2016, but it wasn't until 2019 when we held the EU presidency for the European Council, when we brought up the data in the center of the discussions of digital Europe, and then after pandemic, the digital growth, and now it's all about data. We see it the minimum denominator of everything we do in the digital sphere. Thank you.
Thank you all. And as an audience, you can see that we have now guests from different industries, and I claim that there is surprisingly many things common across industries, and we should actually learn from each other. But let's now go to the strategy topic. So simplistically said, a strategy is a plan to achieve desired goal. And today we are talking about the data strategy, and especially then, first we talk about leadership buy-in, because we know it's not always so easy. Then involving business in the data strategy work and in data in general, and also planning of data strategy implementation and also following it up. So if we then start from the leadership buy-in, and there is a lot of controversy about what the data strategy is and its positioning in the organizational strategy. So Sameli, how would you describe a good data strategy and its position?
Yeah, I mean, the position needs to be in the business strategy. I mean, I don't think there is a data strategy that is separate from business strategy as such. I mean, I think that's the wrong thing to think about. I mean, when you think about data strategy, it is, or data in general, it is one dimension into the business, into the customer, into the business processes. So it is not something that you stamp sort of on top of the business. It is something that is built into the business. And I think that the buy-in needs to be, because of that, the buy-in needs to be from the top management. And when I say top management, I mean the CEO and the board. I mean, if they don't actually buy the idea that the data is in the center, epicenter of everything, you will not succeed with that. And that's why I think that the CEO needs to talk about it, the board members needs to talk about it, and all the levels sort of below need to talk about it. So I think that's really the center of it.
Many also, you mentioned this, that it's part of the business strategy. I see in LinkedIn and many places this kind of discussion, oh, data strategy, it can't be separate, or it's a separate. But I guess you mean, or correct if I'm wrong, that it really needs to start from the business goals and objectives, and then the way it's then documented is then something to be decided. Did you mean that?
Yeah, of course.
More?
I mean, it can be a separate then document where you have documented that how do you look at the business through the data lenses. I see data as something that you need to put a lot of sort of data lenses and look at the business with that angle. You can look at it from many angles, and that's just one angle. And how you definitely how you document it, if it's a separate document or if it's part of sort of the business strategy document, I think that's irrelevant. The thing is that you can actually put the data lenses on. If you cannot do that, then you need to ask yourself that, what are you doing? Because at least in financial services, the whole business is digital. There is nothing else. Every transaction is digital. Every customer is in digital form.
And building on what you were saying there, that I think one good sign is that if you can find from the business strategy or the company strategy some kind of reflection of data or analytics or any of the passwords today around this topic, if you can find that word digitalization or data there, it is already a good sign, because it means that someone has thought about it, that this is so important for the whole company, that it goes exactly like Sameli was here saying, across whole organization in every level.
Yeah, I think it's the same for the policy level. Today's topic is data business strategy. So it's 3 factors multiplied, and if 1 is 0, the product is 0. So I think this is the problem that the EU had. We had no vision, the strategy was missing, and therefore we were not accomplishing the goals we set for the digital single market. But now we are going with a strong steering, also on the head of state level, that we are discussing data. And that is where the common understanding is starting. It's the upper level.
Many say that they have problem in getting the attention from the management. Do you have any tips or ideas or things how to start convincing them that now it's time to start talking about this? So would you, Sameli, like to?
I think 2 things. I mean, one is the story. I mean, everyone likes a story, so you need to create a compelling story. And how do you create a compelling story? You have to have something concrete. I mean, when you talk to the board and the CEO and his or her subordinates, I mean, you cannot just have the clouds. You cannot just paint the picture. You actually have to have something concrete. And of course, people, when they talk about data and AI and so on, they talk about sort of the proof of concepts, I think even too much. Because you have to really get something tangible. Most of the people in multi-billion or $1 million or euro companies, they don't really care about 1,000 euro here and there. They care about real impact to the customer experience, to the business, to create some real value. And if you can create a picture and a story where there is real value, millions of euros worth value, then I think you have the buy-in.
It is like a use case approach. So start from the practical use case. Of course, the risk with the use case typically is that there is also the backbone what you have to put in place. And it takes surprisingly a lot of time to get that backbone in place, whether the backbone is about data structures or data quality or technologies or whatever. But still somehow this use case approach is a very good story what you can build. of course, another storyline behind that one is, which is not the nice one actually, is that you just start to use the data and then something bad happens. And that bad happens creates the burning platform. And then you realize what you need to do. But this is not something that I have heard that very many companies have done it this way, but it is not the nice way to do.
Mm. Yeah, it's exactly how we have done it. We first transformed the transport sector into a data factory, combined the 80 registries into one, also regulated the operators to open certain data and delivered the service level. And then this was the selling kind of, we took the EU and said, you could do so much more if we could scale it this to the European-wide context, and think about the possibilities for market if we can do this in a small scale and then in a bigger scale. So you need to have the grassroots, but then the upper level as well. Yes.
I think this tip, at least for me, was really good that I started to think about it, because I think often these failures also happen with pilots, but the reasons for failures are not communicated clearly enough. That, for example, to get the buy-in for the backbone, I have sometimes said that always you should reserve certain amount of money for the backbone and then do most of the money something that brings value, but that is not so consciously often done by different. Okay, but maybe we then move this, then after we have got the buy-in from the top management, and of course this doesn't have to happen chronological order, but Sameli and you all said that it's critical to have the leadership buy-in. But then involving business in the data strategy work, it's also said it's critical, because without business you actually might not do right things and you don't get them involved the way they need to be involved with the data topics. And there are a lot of things about how to get organized around data. Do you, Maria, have any?
I think it's the same for governments, EU and businesses, that first you have to check the roles and responsibilities. So as governments, our role is to enable. So we are not the doers, but we are the enablers. So creating a kind of an environment where the businesses can innovate a functioning market, maybe something on security and privacy, but seeing that the market mechanism is promoting towards innovation and investments. And in order to show that certainty for the investments, we sometimes also need additional regulation, but it's also about not going to a fragmented regulative landscape where 27 countries would have their independent regulations for each sector. So we need to take a kind of leadership also in how we regulate in a way that it's horizontal. But at the moment, the development is good, because now the basic or the technical details are left to the industries themselves, the sectoral work, and that is what we call within the European language the data spaces, and that's where EU is also offering money, 2 billion approximately, where companies, academia and stakeholders can together build the kind of the foundations for the technical layers for the market, so that we get an internal market for data as well, and that would be providing the scalability. So it's a combination of the government level and also the businesses. We need to get businesses more into policies.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm really happy actually to hear that, and I'm happy to look at the direction where legislation is going there, because I think it is the right call not to try to do the specifications sort of on an EU level to the detail. I mean, I think there needs to be some interpretation for the companies and industries, and I think this is the right direction, because otherwise you spend too much time on the technical details and it will never end. I mean, they are old before they actually are even published, like you kind of implied. And now when we are looking at it from financial industries, I mean, we are used to compliance. I mean, we are in the middle of a tsunami of compliance, and we, or at least I think we are trying to embrace it. Is it sort of a threat or a possibility? I mean, we are trying to look at it as a possibility. It cannot be, compliance cannot be a stamp that you put on the business. It needs to be something that is built into the business. It is something that you use actually to gain even competitive advantage in the same industry compared to others. I mean, I think that if you embrace compliance and you build it as a strength, you can actually add. You don't deduct. So it can even be an advantage in the market.
Definitely so. Coming from the slightly different industry where the, of course, GDPR and those things we need to be compliant, and of course our industry is also regulated by how often elevators or escalators needs to be served and so on. But this data area and compliance on that one is slightly a bit a newer one for us in that sense. And the compliance has maybe come more from the internal purposes. What data we want to share for everybody, what is the ecosystem of buildings and so on. But it's fascinating to notice that actually also on the EU area, this is coming a topic that what if we, with everybody shares some information of the building, some information of the equipment usage in there, and suddenly it is like a ecosystem where everybody can make more own development and innovations on top of it. So interesting in that sense that angle is coming for this more manufacturing maybe, or not so naturally data-driven industries also.
Yeah. How have you managed to, any of you, or even then Maija yourself, that managed to talk about data and content instead of the applications? Because if you start understanding it, hey, there is a data about buildings, there is data about the road, and whatever that you could utilize or join forces with someone else. And for that purpose, you need to actually know your data, what you have, and try to prioritize it, what is most important for you, and how could you actually flexibly join with somebody else? Because I've been part of many large mergers or demergers, and the combining the data and making it align, it's a very heavy task. And if we want to be part of ecosystems, how can we make our businesses understand that, hey, it's data that you need to think about also, not only the technology?
I think if I'm speaking from my company, KONE point of view, actually we are very lucky because we even have an own strategic programs around this one where we specifically collaborate with the other parties who are in the similar industry but coming from the different topics. And of course the other one is also that in some cases we are also utilizing for our internal purposes. So we do have also the need for that same data, which other ones are. So in a way, of course, that is the heart and soul of partnering. A whole ecosystem thinking. That is the backbone of it. So in that sense, I think in our industry, it has been somehow naturally born there. But and on the other hand, since we come from the concrete industry, I mean, everybody understands the physical products, what we are doing. It has been very natural also, especially with this digitalization and this new IoT world and sensors and geographical information and all that one, which has been like roughly 10 years or more, so being there. So we have learned, we have grown in for that thinking.
Sameli.
Yeah, I think you said that data is in the heart of partnering. I agree. And actually, it's a funny thing. I mean, in most industries, like in finance, we tend to think that sort of we are sort of so special. Yeah. We're special and we are in the center of the customer's life. But let's face it, I mean, not one of us wakes up in the morning and thinks about banking. Yeah, that's where I want to go. Banking is the best thing in life. But banking is actually helping people to achieve something.
Indeed.
And when I think about future, I see banking being part of many value chains. It is important for the society and for people, customers, but it is not actually the end stop. The end stop is that customer wants to do something and we enable it. So if we want to be seamless in the customer's life and partnering with others through that, we of course have to think wider. And when we think wider, we think about how we exchange data so that it looks and feels seamless to the customer.
It's an end user experience.
End user experience, yes.
Yeah, maybe Maybe the government, if any, is in the people business, so we can't even kind of choose our consumers or customers. So it's for every individual, they have to have the same seamless experience. And for instance, smart city development is a good place to see where there is a lot of different areas of life coming together in the individual's life. So it's the health, it's the transport, it's the housing, it's the built environment. Accessibility, for instance, is something where the data really needs to flow in order to kind of provide the services. And this is exactly how we can show why it is needed, that we have to go over cross sectors, over business and public kind of walls. And the data needs to flow and make it possible to build coherence between all of these. And that's maybe we have the societal responsibility that we are doing this for the data-driven societies, not only for the businesses, but we have to look carefully that this is done also in a way that the resources are efficiently used. So it's a
it's a citizen
challenge.
Experience,
Yes.
what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. I have, and correct if I'm wrong, but I have seen similarities between this, what now in the banking, for example, data governance became mandatory because of these regulatory requirements. And now also in the public sector, we have this law of information management, or tiedonhallintalaki in Finnish, that if I have understood it correctly, it means that these data assets from different authorities need to be clearly defined and also maybe agreed that who takes the main responsibility of which kind of data. So
it's now binding requirements. Previously, it was more like strategic cooperation. So, but we have seen that if we let everybody decide on the APIs, there's too much to handle in the government sector as well.
Yeah. So in the not public sector, I think also there the idea is that the data domains or areas will be clearly, an asset will be clearly made somebody's responsibility, and they need to take into account the other one's needs. So the data consumers need to make data that works for many. Is that?
Go on. So that's definitely so what you were saying, because we can see also in a smaller scale, this API is a good example actually, that how do you build APIs? What's the most sensible packages? Which comes back to the different kinds of data products, whether the data products are something what we sell outside, whether we publish them free of charge, or whether we use them only for internally. Of course, the purpose can vary there, but still there needs to be a similar thinking that for what purpose and what kind of packages it's sensible. And when that is ready, then we are starting to talk about things like, well, is the data what we are sharing there usable and reliable when we come back to this old topic of data quality, which is another storyline then. But first structures, then qualities, and so on.
You mentioned the data ownership, and you actually mentioned quality, and I think those are very, very important concepts in this space. And I believe that the data ownership and the business ownership of data is in the center of actually making good quality. I mean, we know that in any industry, in anything that we do, the best quality is created when you actually do the work. It is not created when you have pretty much. I mean, for example, if you build a house. When you build the foundation, if you mess up building the foundation and you have pretty much completed everything on top of that, it is very hard to fix that. And it goes with data. I mean, if we have bad quality data and we see it in reporting, there have probably been 100 transformations in between, and it is very, very hard to know where to fix it and hard to fix it. And of course, you have to run everything again. So I think the ownership and quality are so much linked. And if you don't have the business feeling the ownership of data, if they say that, yeah, but there is a chief data officer who owns the data and fixes the data, then I think that company is going to the wrong direction. I think it is impossible for someone centrally try to fix the data asset and get it to the business use.
Indeed.
Everyone needs to take their own responsibility. That's why in our data vision, actually one of the cornerstones is that data is part of daily life. I mean, it needs to be part of the daily life in the field, in the head office, in the world of a CEO and in the world of a CDO.
how about if, I mean, now we have here, as you can see, we have here very advanced companies and organizations who have really put a lot of thoughts and started to do with this journey. But I know for fact that there are a lot of organizations where data is still an application topic, or it's just master data. Even if it's important, it's only looking the master data and that kind of thing. So do you have any advice to people that how to get, we earlier talked about leadership buy-in, but then how you kind of engage busy business owners and those people into this topic, because they have so many topics on their agenda. Do you have any? Maria?
Well, how we put it is not doing anything is a decision. So there is no option of not doing anything. So you have to go with the pace and be there where everybody else is. So that's so it's a decision also not to be aware. But if it's of course that you have to market and in governance maybe talk about metadata. We should be making the data we have more findable and available, and maybe then comes an innovation like nobody thought beforehand. But if you don't market the data you have, you don't find the possibilities, either it's inside or with partners. But anyway, and that would also lower the resistance in sharing data, because you will see the possibilities before entering too far in negotiating on the accessing on the data. So I think it's pretty much on the business side, but this is exactly the same topic we are discussing in the policy level. And for the smaller companies that don't have the negotiating power, how can we even lower the access to data for them if they have already cooperated in making that data available? So every user also has their part in the game.
I think what you're talking about there is exactly to finding the balance between democratizing the data but also protecting it on the right manner. And where is the balance? That depends on the business area or the area in general, but the industry. It depends on the company, but the democratization is there actually the key word, internally and externally.
Yeah. And also, maybe from the technology point of view, I think we are going to a good direction as an industry. I mean, the world is going to the right direction because cloud has pretty much also democratized the technology side. It does not cost for a company that sort of starts with this journey that much. I mean, you can sort of buy things from the cloud pretty easily and start with the journey. And when you start with the journey, again, like I said in the beginning, you need to start with something concrete, something with real impact to the business and to the customer. If you don't do that, I don't think it will fly.
That is also important. I see that also the locking as a factor that is now maybe prohibiting decisions because you don't know what are you buying with the data, the software and the tools. And this is also in the policy level now arising that we need to maybe think more about the digital commons, the skills and the digital tools we have generated together within EU so that the small companies have access to it. But it's the same with the cloud-based tools, that you have access to something that you with your own resources cannot make happen.
We partially already touched the topic, but there was a question that what have been your biggest drivers and prerequisites to have data as part of your corporate strategy? And I think all of you already touched that, but there was also this, how have you been able to bind business stakeholders to the data governance and execution of it? So that was a bit differently asked what I asked, because I asked how to attract them, but how to really get them joining the forces and really doing the thing. Is there any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I already talked about the compliance that we have. So there are sort of two sides. I mean, you need to show the value, the story of value, which means that you cannot harvest a lot of value if you don't have the baseline, the foundation. Okay, so that's part of the story. But then there is the other story, which is the compliance that, well, you do this or you cry and do it anyways. And you can sort of take the value out of investing anyways, or you just invest and don't get any value, and even actually worse, if you do compliance by stamping it sort of on top of your business, it will probably hinder your customer experience, it will make you more ineffective and so on. So I think those two storylines, they are bound together, although there is the carrot and there is the stick.
Mm-hmm. A bit building on what Sameli was saying there, that it's also good to recognize like two different streams. Now, of course, naturally, the compliance is a big deal for you on your business area, but other angles that today the data is quite a lot of talked about as part of the analytics, which is fantastic. It's a value creation, it's new potential, new innovations. But it's good to recognize also and keep in mind that as long as there has been IT solutions like 40 years or whatever is the figure in different companies, data has always been part of the business as usual operations. In some areas more and some areas less, but still, could any company, a bit bigger company today, work without tendering, ordering, fulfillment process, whatever that fulfillment for each company means, and finance, without having the data in digital format? Very few ones are working only with the pen and paper, which you, Ritva, were referring in the beginning. And that means that data is also very important for operations. It's an asset already there. Yeah. Because the business is not running without. And there comes the angle of removing the waste, being more efficient.
Exactly. And
value comes via that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was coming to Sameli's stick and carrot.
It is.
Which one do you want to offer?
We are good at that, but we have talked a lot about balanced approach within the EU. So it's the regulation and the carrots, so the money that we help building these joint innovation ecosystems, but we should remember that there is no field of industry, even in EU, that wouldn't have made their prosperity by sharing data. And car manufacturing is a good example. It has the longest history of sharing data, the requirement to share data on all the measures, the requirements for the vehicle, and therefore we have the spare parts available for innovative car manufacturers to develop their products, and it has kept the prices down, and the innovation power, because there are so many smaller players entering freely the market. So it's a mechanism to also balance the market approach within every kind of traditional industry.
Yeah, good. There was an additional question there, and I think it links to this topic when you say that, Maija, say that there is data everywhere. I mean, it's connected. Everybody of you say the same, but I still think that there is a lot of resistance with people who kind of see that, okay, data is IT. It's part of that application, and they don't separate it in their minds that actually that is something valuable and it means something to me. And you mentioned the metadata that makes things visible, but there is a question, how do you see need for data literacy to data governance, ownership and stewardship? And I think literacy here, it just meant that people would understand better what the data, what can be done with that or so. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. So I think everyone, for example, we have around, let's say, 13,000 people working in OP, and I think everyone should understand sort of the basics of data, that it is important, but they should not understand it especially. They should not or need not understand it the same way. Because in different roles, you need to understand the different aspect of the data and leading with data and how it is connected to the business. If you are, for example, in the development function, you of course need to understand how it is connected technically to the business processes and to the customer and so on. If you are in the field serving the customer, you just need to understand a different side of that. You need to understand that what you key in from the customer meeting, it makes a difference. If you don't key in quality data, it means that we will not have quality data in the end when we report, when we do other things. So every role has a meaningful part to play there.
There's a bit expression by design, and I think part of the data literacy, it is data by design, which means that it's embedded everywhere and everybody should understand it. The challenge with the data maybe is that it's not concrete. You cannot touch it. And it is embedded in the databases, which is the technology. And that's why quite often comes this discussion, what you were highlighting there, that it's an IT business. But we have to separate what is the content and what is really the technology where that content lies. It's like at home, your refrigerator. There's a refrigerator, but it doesn't, the content to there, I mean, the food does not appear there by itself. It appears by someone goes into the store and purchasing something and put in there. And similar manner, we should understand that the data is created sometimes automatically when we talk about IoT data, but still there is a human who decided put a sensor there and what data it collects. And similar manner, if we think about IT solutions, there are fingers on the keyboard which are feeding in the data one way or another. And then comes the rules, what Sameli was highlighting here already, that who are the drivers, what is the group of persons who are setting the guidance, how to collect the data, what kind of practices we have around it, do we need a validation, can we automate? And that's quite often the data management persons who are guiding the work, but they are definitely not the persons who are necessarily typing in or cleansing all the data. It's impossible in the big companies, like you were highlighting already there.
Maybe we now move to the third part, which is the planning, the data strategy implementation and follow-up. And we already briefly touched that it's not something that happens in a day or two. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And basically, it also requires a significant cultural change or transformation. And of course, depending on the starting point of the organization, it can be that you really need to start from the basics, or that you can jump in and already are well on your way. But what to take into account when planning the strategy and the implementation, and do you have any lessons learned or something that you would like to share with the audience? Maria?
Well, I would say that the implementation phase is where we kind of put in realization the promises we have made. So within EU, it's also about how we do it. So it's about values and coming maybe to corporate culture and such. So it's also about what was the promise and how we realize it in practice. And therefore, we have called for transparency. It's also transparency towards the consumers, the individuals, the citizens, that they know what have been done with the data and what it provided for them. And I think this kind of discussion also on how we can better formulate the abstractness around data into a common language, which is understandable to all. It's a critical part of implementation, not only maybe for the citizens, but also in the mid layers for normal workers and citizens in decision-making positions.
And I think you said it very well already, that it's the root, the basic part what you need to understand, that it is really a transformation. And transformation meaning like that we start to value the data in that sense, that everybody understands that I have a responsibility, but my responsibilities might be slightly different than the other one's responsibility. Reflecting the IT cannot be responsible for the content, but IT can be responsible that we do a good UI design so that it's easier for the end user and clear for the end user what are data I'm feeding in. And then, of course, the end users, the fingers on the keyboard comes there, that they do understand their responsibilities. But we also build practices where there is a constant and continuous improvement, feedback and improvement loop, so that we know what rules we have to improve, what processes we have to improve, what IT solutions we have to improve, because it is always all of three, typically it is all of these three ones, what we have to improve. And it is a continuous, it's a never end, in a way, sounds horrible, but it is a never-ending story. There is a backbone which you have to put in place, and when you have achieved a certain level of maturity, then it is a continuous journey after that one.
Sameli?
I think when I think about the journey we've had, for example, it's about culture and it's about creating the value, really. And when I talk about culture, I mean, someone has said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it doesn't matter how good strategy you have created. I mean, if you don't have the culture and operating model that supports it, it goes all wane pretty much. So I think the data literacy, for example, that everyone understand at least the basics in different roles. Of course, you need to sort of highlight the value of data being an asset, being one dimension of the business and that kind of things. It is part of the data-driven company sort of formula, and I think the culture transformation is a long journey, like you said. You don't have, you cannot think about it as a half-a-year project or one-year project. It is something that takes a long time, and it will iterate, the world will change, and you have to adapt. But then there is the value side, and I think the value side is like I said, we started from the customer value really. Now we have harvested, if we think about what we have taken from the data, we have taken maybe 100 million euros of additional value to automation and let's say AI and that kind of things. But when I think about that, we started from pure customer value and didn't even think about the foundation so much in the beginning. I think if we would have done it in a way that we would have started from the foundation, we probably would have not got the funding. We probably would have been shut down. So at least our company, I now it's easy to say when looking back that I think it was the right thing to do, to start from the customer value and then fix the backbone when you get the buy-in and they can see the tens and of millions of value.
Yeah.
It is often said, by the way, and I mentioned earlier when was it Maija, you mentioned this first, that trying and then maybe even failing, because it's enormous efficiency problems with data that I believe that because the number of applications and amount of data has increased tremendously, but at the same time we haven't paid so much attention to the data, its purpose, why it's there, documentation, the metadata that Maria, you were talking about, that it actually, it's like a sand in the, how do you say it in English, but hiekkaa rattaissa in Finnish, but meaning that it actually slows you down in many ways if you haven't defined your data, if the quality is not, first of all, understood that what the quality should be, and then making sure that the quality is met, that actually then building the strategy roadmap by having this kind of benefit plus then telling the story about the foundation, I think it might in many cases help people to understand. Very long speech, but I got excited. Yeah, Maria.
Maybe coming back to the failure, try and error is of course okay, but then we, as governments, we have to set a certain boundaries where you cannot kind of go around, and that's about why we talk so much about trust. And that trust is something that we cannot afford to lose in the data business or in digital means. So that is also where the implementation is important, to check the roles, to check the skills of each in their positions, to have adequate knowledge on what is expected in order to promote the trust. So that is also a fundament, like Sameli mentioned, that is by design have to be in place, and that is kind of our boundary that we cannot exceed.
Yeah, one last question about this data strategy implementation and follow-up. That I understand that in the market that is a difficult thing to do, that how to show value with the data and the progress of the needed, especially the foundation part. Do you have any good ideas or tips for the audience regarding that measuring part, or are you still early in that yourselves also?
Well, a couple of things what comes to my mind is, and these are very simple actually, very common things, that of course you can start to measure the data quality, provide a certain KPIs, how many duplicate customers we have, or customer records, or do we understand what is actually even a customer? Do we have a same definition of it, that we measure these things in the similar manner? But other things of course are also like that, areas that where we even have a make agreement in the company that what does these things mean. I mean that really so-called data blueprints or data definitions or whatever things on the business language. I'm not talking about only about like data models or stuff like that one. They are important too, but I emphasize maybe a bit the business language part here because it comes back to like this example, what is a customer and what data we should collect from the customer. So we can report also this kind of things and measure how well we have commonly agreed these things, and then of course how commonly we have deployed them, whether to the processes or how many IT solutions are aligned. Very simple KPIs, and you can start to show the progress by this one. Or then another topic could be things like, there might be really a business value case like if there is a problem with the invoicing or if there's a problem with having certain other actions, whether they are leads or whatever, you pick up a topic from there and you start to measure with a simple KPIs those one, like are the leads closed latest on the day, what is today, or they are very practical and simple things. But you can show the progress and via that one you can also show the value.
Yeah, Sameli.
I definitely agree, and I mean, I think what you cannot measure, you cannot really improve. I mean, how would you even know that you've improved? So I think KPIs are important, but I think also it is important to sort of recognize that it is not easy to, and in some cases not even relevant to put everything in terms of numbers.
Indeed.
Because I think many times you can describe the quality, you can understand that you are progressing with the quality with other measures than just numbers, and I think that's also important to highlight. And it's sometimes hard to communicate also to the board and so on if you don't have the number. It's easy to say that this number is now 57, it goes next quarter 75 to 75. That is easy, but many times it's not that easy, and you more or less have to just say that these are the activities that we need to do to improve the quality, and you need to trust basically that we are doing the right things there.
How to measure the data literacy?
Yeah, exactly, that kind of thing. So many times you have to trust that these are the right activities.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would like to encourage all kind of metering within the business side generates something you can also report to the stakeholders and to the audience. So transparency, just like in environmental reporting, I think data responsibility is an important topic.
Exactly.
Yeah, very wonderful discussion, and we are now coming closer to the end of this webinar, and I have here one question I will ask from you, and then maybe if after that you will all give something for the audience to remember of this session or from you. So there is this kind of question: how to best benefit from data ecosystems and co-creation among companies? What do you see can be the role of various funding mechanisms such as Business Finland, EU and others to create winning competitive advance in Finland? Data, AI, automation and digital. Is it maybe very long questions, but is it maybe to Maria?
Yeah. Well, I would encourage in this as well, because more and more the policy level and the strategic level are combined with the project level, meaning ecosystems established within the EU funding. And if you are not there, you are not part of the standardization work. And I wouldn't be left outside if I could have the choice. So being there and doing that means that you will most likely be in the business also in the future.
Yes, so actually we didn't have more questions here, and we now discussed about the data strategy, leadership buy-in. We got very good tips there. We discussed about quite much about business involvement and the governance models and other things, and we also discussed about the implementation and follow-up. What would be your takeaways, or what would you like to, Maija, for example, to tell to our audience? Takeaways.
Key takeaways.
Key takeaways.
Maybe thinking about the data, like already discussed, that it's a technology agnostic, definitely. So don't think about the data. It is only one IT solution or IT. It's a technology agnostic. Thinking that way. The second one, it's good to recognize also the data is also to some extent process agnostic, not fully, but to some extent. So especially when we talk about things like master data, also they are definitely process agnostic. And also thinking about that to some extent also data is business line agnostic. So having a really like a holistic view for data practices, whether it is roles and responsibilities, whether it is IT solutions. So serving data for multiple purposes and build the practice around so that data really holistically end to end in different areas flows fluently. And that's maybe my guidance there, that it's not a one project, it is not a one business line, it is the whole corporate, what you have to think about, and whole business and business value via it.
Okay, Sameli.
I'm repeating myself, obviously, but it is the value. It is the value that you need to sort of focus on, and through the value, everything else pretty much follows. And I mean, as I see it, I said before that data is one view to the business. It is just one lens to the business. It doesn't have an intrinsic value. We should not do data strategy because of data strategy. You should not do ICT strategy because of ICT strategy. I mean, they are all because of the customer. They are all because of, well, we are customers from your point of view. All the citizens. So I think that needs to be the view, and data is connected to the processes and to the customers. That is where the value comes from. And through that process, when you understand how it is connected, you can actually create new value. You can create more value, efficiency, and so on. And I think like said, I advise everyone to sort of look at real meaningful use cases when they start to implement more like data-driven culture and data roadmap. I mean, if you don't have real meaningful use cases that has an impact to the customer's life or the efficiency of business, you will not succeed. I think that you really have to think about.
Yeah. Maria.
Yeah, maybe repeating a little bit. So data is reusable, so you cannot use too much of it, and the value comes from sharing and utilizing data. And that is maybe my key takeaways, that we would really innovate and learn and act with data.
Yeah. Thank you. And my key takeaway really was the try something with business value, and by that you can better sell the foundational work to the leaders if you haven't yet succeeded in that. And also other thing that I got out from this discussion was that really, as I assumed, was that the different industries have a lot of similar challenges, similar things on the agenda, and they can benefit from the work that regulators are doing and also from each other. So hopefully we will meet more with this Data Insider and other events to share experiences. So I want to thank you on my behalf, and you will afterwards receive the recording from us, and we will look if there was any other questions or proposals for future events. But thank you and have fun with data. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.